Hello and welcome to today's edition of Your Questions Answered with Father Gruner. I'm John Veneri. We take your questions on this program. Father Gruner answers them. We talk about them. Continue to send them to us. questions@thefatimacenter.com. Today's question is this. Canada and many other countries and places have been consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. However, since these consecrations took place, many crimes against God's laws have been committed in these countries and places. Abortions by the millions, for example. Does this mean that these consecrations are now nullified?
Well, for example, let's talk about St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. St. Patrick's Cathedral was consecrated maybe over 100 years ago. I don't know how old the building is, but recently, and I'm talking now about, say, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, a murder was committed in St. Patrick's Cathedral. And so the cardinal at the time of the murder had to reconsecrate the cathedral because, if there's a serious crime such as the spilling of blood, I don't mean if somebody scrapes their hand, but if somebody's killed, usually it's a crime. It's a crime against man. It's a crime against God. It's a crime against man because the man's killed. It's a crime against God because God made that person. But it's especially a crime against God also because it's a sacred place. And so that sacred place has been desecrated, and therefore that sacred place needs to be reconsecrated. Now, does that mean that the old consecration has nothing left over from it? I wouldn't say that. On the other hand, it's a serious thing. So, by all means, Canada and other places should be reconsecrated too. There have been many crimes, such as abortion, taking place in Canada and other places as well. And these abortions, no doubt, pollute the country. And we should be rededicated. And it doesn't mean that the next day that they have to do it every day because they have abortions every day, but certainly renewing the consecration would be a good thing.
Well, it's interesting too because the Portuguese bishops consecrated Portugal in 1931, I believe.
Yes.
And then they received the fruits of that consecration. But while everything was still moving forward, they made the consecration a second time.
Yes.
Around 1935, I think.
Something like that.
1935. And they said they would do it as an act of thanksgiving.
Yes.
Did they
do it a third time in 1938 or something like that?
In the 30s, it was twice.
Twice. And they did. I think they did it again in the 1970s, I think.
Could be, yeah.
Now, but the point is that they said that if they were preserved from the Spanish Civil War,
that's right. Yes,
they would do it a second
in Thanksgiving. Yes,
yeah. And so the Spanish Civil War broke out. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I think they broke out in 36 or something like that. So I think they did it in 38 then, the second time.
And then they were preserved from the horrors of the Second World War.
Yes.
That the war did not sweep into their country.
Yes.
And Sister Lucy said it's because of that. She actually told them ahead of time.
Yes.
That if you make this consecration, the country will be preserved from the horrors of war, which they were. And even Pius XII acknowledged.
Yeah, and in fact, when you, I know you've written on this, John, about the fact that what transformations took place because of the consecration. That first of all, that there was an increase in religious and priestly vocations.
Well, there was a Catholic Renaissance across the board. Upsurge in religious vocations, priestly vocations, Catholic actions, the Catholic press. All that had been suppressed under the Masonic government, say what, from 1910, something like that.
1910,
and it broke out. It broke open because of this consecration. There was the restoration of Catholic social order.
Even, for example, there was divorce before the consecration, and the Spanish government, the Portuguese government, said, well, if you want to be married in the church, you have to sign a piece of paper which says, I recognize, so I get married in the church, I cannot appeal to the state for a divorce.
I can't even think about divorce.
Because if I do, then you can't get this. So that was part of the law. Say, well, I mean, the state for good order, shall we say, in the state, in civil effects of marriage, says, well, if you're going to have a divorce, then we have to sort of regulate this. But if you're going to get married before a Catholic priest, you're signing away your right, by the very fact, to not apply it to the state ever for divorce. And 90% of the people after that...
yes, sacramental marriages did not go down, they went up.
Yes.
And by 1960, 91% of every marriage that took place in Portugal was a sacramental marriage witnessed by a priest with the understanding that they're not even going to think about divorce.
And they could not apply for divorce.
That's a civilization of love. That's the real thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it would be even greater when the consecration of Russia. It would be even much greater because Portugal didn't have the ability to resist the certain powers that even Pius XII was afraid to resist. Even though he stood up to Hitler, he stood up to Mussolini, he wouldn't stand up to these powers. He said one hardly dared do so. Portugal was too small to do that. Russia will be big enough to do that.
So the great blessings will come from these consecrations. But we've talked about before this program that, while we await this, we can consecrate ourselves to Our Lady.
Yes,
and consecrate our families.
As families as well, certainly.
And my wife and
even parishes. For example, the city of Miami, the Archbishop of Miami and the Mayor of Miami consecrated Miami within the last 18 months. I think it's more likely in the last 12 months to the Immaculate Heart of Mary.
Yes,
and
the more the better.
When you take the city of Seville, in the Spanish Civil War, it broke out I think in 1936, there was 1 million, there's 20 million Spaniards at the time, 1,500,000 were killed in the Spanish Civil War. That's, 5 times 15, 5 times 1.5. 7.5, that's 7.5% of this died. But in the city of Seville, not one person. Now the city of Seville is maybe in the million, but at least several 100,000 people, not one of them was killed in the Spanish Civil War. That was the only city that was consecrated to the Immaculate Heart.
Yes, so Our Lady wants the consecration, and she doesn't want it for herself as much as she wants to use it as grace for us.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot that we get,
yes,
but we have to make that simple, sincere, proper
yes,
act
yes,
to do it.
yes.
Yes. So anyway, we continue our devotion to the Immaculate Heart, and we'll wrap this program, and we'll see you on the next edition. Thank you.